Love you. I can't see that clock back there, but I can see this one. It's a pleasure to be here. Usually I get phone calls from Terry Aspiranson to ask, who would you recommend to speak? So this year he said, we want you to speak. So I think they ran out of options. And just by the way, one of your speakers a few years ago is a dear friend of mine named Governor Judy March, former governor of Montana. And so I asked you to pray for Judy. She has pancreatic cancer. April 14th, she'll have the Whipple surgery, which is a very delicate thing. It will take quite a bit of time. Her spirits are fantastic. She said, this is all about God. This is not about me. And she said, I will be fine one way or the other. So I'm in touch with her often. And so please pray for Judy March. I look over this crowd today, and I see faces and memories. It is walking down memory lane. I mean, when I was 9 years old, my principal was Ed Zeiger, sitting right back there. My brother and I became very familiar with Ed when I was in the 4th grade, and my brother was a 6th grader. And we had to do push-ups. I think my brother was told to do 15, I was told to do 10. I couldn't do 4. You know, so if he was trying to develop our character and helping us take responsibility for something, I guess, that we did. I mean, come on, we were mom's angels. But, so if you have a problem today with my character, it really goes back to the trauma setting with Ed. Okay? So just so you know that. I see the man who really taught me how to do this, what I'm doing today. And sitting over there, Tom Lumsden. So if you have a problem with my ability to speak today, go to Tom. I'm just sloughing off every responsibility that I have here this morning. But it is a walk down memory lane. I mean, Dennis King is down here, the owner of Tiffany's. I think my brother had his first date there with his now wife 40 whatever years ago. I think I used to get set to the side for being a little bit too rambunctious on the skating court back then, or the skating rink, by knocking people down, and I would get penalized. So there's a lot of memory here today. It's a privilege to stand here and communicate to you today. The question I ask you this is a quote that's my favorite quote. Why tiptoe through life to arrive at death safely? Why tiptoe through life to arrive at death safely? Why live like that when there's a greater option? When there's a better way? When we can live above it? That we can break through fear? Why live like that? Why tiptoe through life to arrive at death safely? Defining moments. We've all had them. What's your first? I remember my first. I was 6 years old. I was like Forrest Gump. I wore braces. And so I was crippled. I was disabled. A lot of other names that were hurled my way as a kid, I'm sure. But I would come home and I would complain this particular week. Quite often, actually. And my normal tactic that during the week of coming home from school, 1st grade, Mrs. Henderson Spending Elementary School, was to sit down with my mom after she had baked wonderful breads and cookies, and Mama would spend time with me, and she would sit there and she would look at me and she would pat my little fat face and she would listen to my day and she'd say, Stevie, tell me all about your day. But I just continued to complain, and Mama one day, she grabbed my fat little face and she said, Stevie, you can complain all you want, but you may be like this the rest of your life. If you complain and you choose to be negative, you'll have no friends, and people will walk away from your life. But Stevie, if you learn to embrace this as a friend, you will learn to inspire and lead others. And you will have so many friends, you will not know what to do with them. Now you say, that's a little bit harsh for a 6-year-old to hear that. But I knew exactly what she was saying. I learned later that she went into her bedroom and she cried for about an hour. But she was courageous to love me the way I needed to be loved. And so I learned how to ride a bicycle. It was a girl's bicycle because when your leg's straight, you know, that bar is pretty close and you got to get one that's down a little bit further. I learned how to swim. I played baseball and I was disabled. And miraculously, the brace was taken away and I went on to do things that I never dreamed that I could do. But that was the first defining moment in my life. Because somebody was willing to look and say, you're better than this. You can live above this. There's more in there. You can inspire and you can lead people. Throughout my life, I struggled with, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And what then? 3 questions that everyone here will probably ask in some form before they leave this earth. And I asked those questions when I was a 3-year-old. My daddy came upstairs. He was about 6'3", fought in the Battle of the Bulge, was wounded. He was a great athlete. He was John Wayne. He would come upstairs every night, and if my mom didn't, and sometimes they did it together, and my brother had a bed here, and I had a bed here, and so my dad would sit on one of our beds, and he would pray with us before we went to bed. That little old prayer, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And my brother turned to my daddy that night. I don't know what night it was, but I remember this very vividly. He said, Daddy, what's it like to die? What's it really like to die? And it was the end of the day, and he was wanting to get back down to his wife, and the kids were in bed, and this was their time alone. And I'm sure he didn't give a whole lot of thought to that. He said, it's dark, and he turned out the lights, and he walked downstairs. That was my first horror movie. And all of a sudden, I began to ask those questions. And so my formula as a little boy was, I'm going to be good. I'm going to achieve much. God's going to know who I am. And all of my life from that point on was geared towards that objective. Unfortunately, it left me empty. My name is on the trophies in this town. People knew me. I achieved things that a lot of young men don't achieve. I had friends everywhere. But I was so empty inside. And I went home one night contemplating taking my own life as a 17-and-a-half-year-old. And I stopped by a friend's house. And to be honest with you, I did not know one person in my high school that would claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Not one. And I looked. And I stopped by this friend's house, and he, in the depths of his despair for me, reached back into the treasure chest of his Sunday school days and pulled out something for me. And he asked me these questions. What are you going to do next year? I said, well, I'm going to go play football for the University of Colorado, which is where I went first. I'm going to graduate. I'll probably get married, maybe play pro football. He said, what are you going to do then? I said, well, I'm going to grow old, smoke a pipe, sit in front of the fireplace and play with my grandkids. Bliss. What are you going to do then? I said, well, I'm going to die. He said, what are you going to do then? And I had no answer. And he shared this verse that says this, for what shall it profit a man if he gain the world but lose his soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? That was me. I was wanting to hand God this silver platter of, look at all these niceties that I've done. And he laughed. He said, you cannot earn it this way, Steve. He kept hope alive in my life. And that's what a leader does. A leader is one who keeps hope alive. And for several months, I began to pursue the questions and pursue the answers to the depth of my soul, the longing. And I went to this evangelistic meeting. I didn't like anything about it. Nothing about it. But I felt like this guy revealed my life to everyone there. And afterwards, I sat down with a friend, a man who would become my friend. And I told him, I said, I don't know if I know how to pray, but I think I have found the one thing that's worth living for and worth dying for. I want to follow Jesus. And that night, February 24th, 1972, changed my life. It was a defining moment. I said, God, if somebody sees something different in my life that they've never noticed before, I will never cease to tell people about you. I will never cease to love you, regardless of the consequences or the cost. Because I came to understand that saving faith was the exchange of all that I am for all that Jesus is. That's a pretty good deal. And I walked into school the next day, and this girl named Anna Mae, she walks up to me and she goes, "What's wrong with you?" Now, I was pretty extroverted, but guess what? If you don't know that, ask any extrovert in here. We're actually pretty insecure inside. Okay? And so I'm like, I didn't have any socks on, so they were the right color. I checked my zipper was fine. You know, my colors were fine. I said, what do you mean? She goes, "That smile." I said, "I smile every day." She goes, "Not like that." She said, "It's like something's flowing out of your eyes. What is it?" I said, "Well, Anna, I don't know how to tell you this. But last night I decided that I would become a follower of Jesus. And I only know a couple of things. Anna, I'm forgiven." "You forgiven? What have you ever done?" I said, "A lot. And I'm going to heaven, Anna. And I just feel like I have this compulsion to love people." School headlines. Ridgway finds security in God. You don't turn back after that. 20 years later, I got a note from Anna. "Thank you, Steve. I now understand. Thank you for telling me about Jesus 20 years ago. It only took me a little while to get there." A defining moment in my life. The invitation to Jesus. About 6 years ago, while serving on the board of an organization that cares for the persecuted church in the world, I thought, I should go and really understand what I'm governing here. And so I went to a place called Gaza. And I knew that I would not come back because of what I had read in the papers. So I said my goodbyes, but I knew I was to go, and that may sound strange. Gaza is about the size of Ording, from Ording Valley clear up to Lake Washington. And it's about 5 miles wide. And there are 19 terrorist organizations there. Hamas is the most well-known. And so I went with this man named Anna Vanderbilt, who's affectionately known as Brother Andrew. And we met with terrorists. But we met with the church. You see, we live in this Western world where we think we're the center of the universe because it's all we've ever known. And that's not an indictment against us. It's just who we are. I'm a part of that. But 80% of this thing we call the body of Christ, 80% do not live in the Western world. They live in the hard and hostile places. They don't meet in places like this. They meet in caves and underground places. And when they meet together to worship, there may be 10, and you will be with them, and they will raise their hands, and they will weep, and they will sing like this. They do not even sing words. They mouth words. Because their normal is this: today I die. Today I go to prison. Today I have no food. Today I lose my education. Today my children are stolen away by their grandparents legally to be raised in a hostile environment. Today I'm kicked out of my family. That is their norm. They wake up every day and that is their norm. And they wake up with an attitude that's glorious. Because they have discovered the one thing that will always be at tension for us. And that is this: Jesus is truly enough. And when I came home from this time of being in rooms with AK-47s around the room, of bombs going off, of holding the dying, and caring for the newborns, it wrecked my life. And I would never again see life the way I saw it for all the years before. Because I got connected to the family I never knew I had. You ever watch, okay, it's an indictment, okay. You ever watch Oprah when she had those kids come on and they would be reunited with families that were given up for adoption? And everybody's just sobbing? I got reunited with my family, who I never knew existed. And if you don't know it's there, you can't do anything about it. It's not an indictment against you or me. It's just, I didn't know. And so I went back again and again. This last November, I met with a gentleman named Andrew White, the vicar of Baghdad. He was trained as an anesthesiologist, felt God called him to the seminary. He's an Englishman. He ended up in Baghdad. He has MS. And he told this story of one of his congregations. You've all heard a lot about ISIS. And his precious children from this congregation were taken into a room. And ISIS walked in and they said, "Renounce your faith, say these words, and become a Muslim." And this precious 8-year-old looked at him with a smile on his face. And he said, "Oh, sir, you don't understand. All we have ever known is the precious love of Jesus. How could we ever say no to him?" And with that, every child had a bullet put through their head. Every child. Oh, sir, how could we ever say no? All we have ever known is the precious love of Jesus. I want to Gaza. I want to be with the precious church that's there. But God has given us favor amongst these extremists. And by the way, I have done my homework. I have done my due diligence. I have met with heads of state. I am not going to prison for politics. Okay? This is not give me liberty or give me death. I'll do that thing, but I'm not doing, I'm not going to jail for this. And they said, make sure you don't do this, or this. And I said, I don't. And so we go and we meet, and we were headed over to meet with the most powerful man in the most powerful terrorist organization in Gaza. And so we just tell the taxi cab driver his name, and he goes, you guys are Westerners. You're going to go meet with this guy? How does that work? That was what went on his face. He said, okay. So we went. And when we got there, the call to prayer in the mosque came about. And it's kind of a beautiful but eerie thing at the same time. It just blasts all over the city. So we knew we wouldn't see this gentleman for a little bit. Now his house was blown up right across the street in July and August. We've been in that home many, many times. And so the soldiers with their AK-47s said, sit here. And so we sat there, and people piled into the mosque. And when they left, they really didn't leave. They stayed around. But out walked a man who we found out was a doctor. And he sat and pulled up a stool, and he sat right there, and he began to talk to us for 3 minutes. We had a mutual friend. And all of a sudden, he flew out of that chair into my face, and I stood up, and he was right here. And he began to take his finger into my face and say these words, renounce your faith, become a Muslim. Those are the words that get your head chopped off. Those are the words that get a bullet through your head. And I thought of those precious children. And the crowd was jeering and screaming and egging him on. And I just felt peace. I'm not courageous. I felt peace. And I looked at him with a smile on my face. And I said, no, not going to happen. Ever. And out of the corner of my eye, the two soldiers took a step forward with their guns, pointed at me. I said, this is not going to be a good day for my mama. She's not going to want to hear this. And then the gentleman we were going to meet with pulled up. Out of respect, the man backed down. Not out of fear, because ideologically it's in his system. Now, I don't suggest that this is the way you combat evil, but I don't think it's all that bad. Again, that peace just flooded me. And the man backed down over here. And I walked over to him, and I got as close to him as he was to me. And I looked at him and I said, look, what you just did to me, I would never do to you. I said, but this is what I would do. I would show you honor, I would show you respect, and I would love you. And I just hugged him. And this stiff body, and these eyes that were clouded, it was the personification of evil. It was a man who was possessed. His body went limp. And then he stepped back. And right before me, his eyes literally went clear. And then he grabbed my face, and he wouldn't stop kissing me. It's very Middle Eastern, okay? You better get used to it. You just better man up. You don't like hugging, and you're not going to like kissing. So don't go there. And he wouldn't stop kissing me. And finally, I just kind of set him back. Was he changed? I don't know. This may upset some of you. Most Muslims are not radical extremists. There's 140,000 in the Seattle area. I often go and converse with them. They're afraid until you speak to them. I saw a man pull out his prayer carpet at noon one day. And I walked over and I just watched him. And he got up, and he was probably a PhD from Eritrea, driving a taxi. And when he got up, he went like this, because I was watching him. And I walked over and I said, I respect a man who prays. Can I give you a hug? He just started to weep. I said, here's my card. Let's go to coffee. If we don't win them, they will rule us. We can spend 10 million and go kill one. Or we can spend 10,000 and go win one. I don't spend 10,000. But I'm trying to win their hearts by becoming friends and entering into a conversation about Jesus. Isa, they call him. And they have high regard for him. I'm not sure what you can do with the radical extremists, but I continue to step into that. In Gaza right now, ISIS flags are flying. I don't know if I'll be able to get back in, but there are 2 men in the world that have access to the people I'm talking about. One is from Puyallup, Washington, and one is from Bristol, England. And so why not us? Why not us? Why tiptoe through life to arrive at death safely? People, there is a family that is ours that we need to connect to. We need to be sending our young people there who are vibrant and energetic and who would love these children and these people because they have no hope. They have no hope. But there is a body of Christ that I have held in their living and their dying. I have wept with them. I have loved them. I have been ruined by them. And it feels really good. Why tiptoe through life to arrive at death safely? I want to share with you this. It's a story that I love to read. It says this. In the mid-70s, the KGB in Moscow picked up an underground Baptist leader whom they suspected of printing illegal scriptures on a homemade press. They beat and tortured him to find out the whereabouts of the press, but he uttered not a word. In desperation, they brought in his 16-year-old son. They said, "We will beat him to death in front of you unless you tell us where it is." Immediately, the man began to waver. This was too much. How could he watch his precious son die? The blows began to descend, crunch of bone and screams of agony. These were the sounds that went straight to his soul. And he was just about to cry out, "Stop! I'll tell you where it is." When his son cried out in the midst of his pain, "Dad, don't give up. I can see Jesus coming for me. And he's beautiful." With those words, he died. With a beating, there was beauty. This may not sound like a profound statement, but to me, it breaks me down. This stuff about Jesus, I believe it's real. I believe it's real. And my encouragement to us in the West, ISIS is not our greatest threat to the American church. Sorry that I may offend some of you this morning. The American church is the greatest threat to the American church. The church in America is on the decline. But in 80% of the world's body of Christ, it's doing this. Iran is the fastest growing church in the world. Women are leading it because the men are dead or they're in prison. And the women have locked arms and they have said this: we will pay the ultimate price for the testimony of Jesus Christ in our land to our people, because he is far more precious than our life. They've discovered that he is really enough. Syria is the second fastest growing church. Egypt, the third. The church is growing in these places. We need to go find out how. Because they have learned to make persecution their friend. My mother taught me a long time ago that you need to embrace suffering as a friend, because we will all suffer. The American church does suffer, and the American church is hurting. Are we going to be a part of the solution? Or are we going to be a part of the problem? Why tiptoe through life to arrive at death safely? There's so much more. God intended for this to be a miraculous adventure, a journey that we would engage in. And the result would be that his love would spill through our life onto the lives of those that we walk next to every single day. What are your defining moments? Have they wrecked you to the place of stepping out and embracing the great adventure that God has so desired for us to have? I can see Jesus coming for me, and he's beautiful. Bless you.